Simon.
Finished.
Now I'd like to give you all a magic wand so that you can tell the Royal Commission that if you had your way, what out-of-home care would look like today with all problems fixed. Now, who'd like to start?
I don't think it'd exist.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah.
I don't think it would exist.
You wouldn't need it.
You wouldn't need it?
No, we wouldn't be here today, that's for sure.
Because there would be sufficient resources given to families so as to enable them to have safe environments for their children.
And I think if you stepped in early enough, it wouldn't get to the point where it's crisis. It would be solved earlier on.
So to have more involvement with families who might be experiencing difficulties to help them so that they can keep their children with them.
Yes.
Anything else?
I think on that note, there's because some records start so early in a child's life, and it doesn't matter what the parents will do because none of the interventions would work. You'd still need some kind of backup. I don't even think out-of-home care is going to go away.
No.
But bringing the kids in earlier instead of just letting the cases pile up until it becomes a crisis within the family, I think that would work out better.
And what would you be bringing them into, Kate?
An out-of-home care system that's adequately resourced and has enough staff to give one-on-one support to these young people and enough carers so that you have a carer and you go into long-term placement rather than to short-term solutions.
Mm-hmm. Tash? I thought you were going to say something before.
Yeah, I lost it.
It happens.
Might come back to me.
Anything else, Kate?
I think a magic wand's a bit of an unusual solution, pretty much.
What about having people other than your carer and other than the person who's responsible for you in the department or other organisation to talk to? How would that look?
Well, I'd have those people anyway if my placement was stable enough to allow me to stay within the same community and at the same school and have the same friends. That would be a given.
So who would you talk to?
I talk to now my friends and people who I've gotten to know over the years.
So if you were in out-of-home care and you were in a stable placement and you had a sense of community around you and you're at a stable school, if you had been harmed in out-of-home care, who would you talk to? Who would you tell?
I would have gone to, I'm not sure whether I would have gone to a friend or a parent or a friend or to a teacher I trusted.
Mm-hmm. What about others? If you were in a stable long-term placement, you had a sense of community, who do you think you would turn to tell if you had a problem about being harmed in your placement?
Majority of the time I went to my carer, except for when it was really severe and I was more afraid that if I went to her, I would move placements. Then I went to my youth worker.
Jono?
As Tash was just saying, then it does depend on the circumstance. If it is your carer that's doing the issues, or if it's out of that. Obviously, if it was the carer, then me personally, at that stage when I was in care, I wouldn't know who to talk to because I had very big trust issues. But obviously, if it was major, I don't know, because I did have, a few little incidents that happened and I just buried them away. I thought it was a given that happened to me in care. So I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
India?
Well, I'm lucky. I've got a really good relationship with not only my carer, but with a number of support workers throughout my agency. So I would just go to whoever I thought was appropriate at the time.
Thank you.
Now, we've got some questions too, if you would bear with us. I'm happy for you to take a seat, Ms Furness.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kate, can I start with you? Just listening to what you've been talking about. I've just been making some notes rather than interrupting Ms. Furness. So I'm going to take you back to some of the things that we've been talking about just before the break. So I'll start with you, Kate. Just right in the introduction, you talked to us about, I think it's you and India, been involved in something called partnership agreements, that you're developing something. Do you want to just talk to us some more about that?
It's called the Services Connect Forum.
Yeah.
And it's basically where local organisations who have a vested interest or a lot of interaction with young people who are in the foster system, they meet up and they bounce ideas off each other and they work together to make it a more sustainable and supportive environment.
Okay. Did you want to add anything to that, Kate?
I think it's just they've come to us. We went and spoke to their forum, and they've come back to us and they wish to form a partnership with us where we advise them on issues about out of home care and how their organisations can support us better.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you about. So your involvement is now quite recent. You've just been invited in. Is that what's happening?
I think we got invited in about 3 months ago, and they're still in the process of formation and working out where things are. So we've just been given our spot.
Okay. To just generally respond to the issues that are raised in that forum. Is that what that means?
And also to inform them of issues that I think that we have that they could do better.
Okay. So that's consistent with, I think, Tash, what you were talking to us about before. Indeed, I think you've all been saying in various ways that part of your work is about giving young people, children and young people, a voice. So I want to just ask you all about that, really, about how you're doing that. Happy for anyone to start. What the process is about how you're speaking on behalf of young people.
Okay, so with Create, we hold monthly YAGs, which are youth advisory groups, where a lot of young people who have done the training to become young consultants come together, and we all bounce off each other of what we went through and what needs to be changed, what needs to stay the same, to initially make the department perfect, kind of thing. And we also go to connection events where we meet other young people who are also from a care experience and stuff, and we get talking to them and find out what they went through and stuff like that. And then initially we bring it all together, and then some of us will go to meetings with DCP workers and stuff and sit down and say what we think needs to be changed and what needs to stay. I've gone to a lot of caseworker trainings where I sit and I basically tell a caseworker what they need to do, what they need to keep doing and stuff to make them a perfect caseworker, so that a lot of young people aren't forgotten and left out and stuff. And then we also, I also go and speak at different conferences and stuff. I just spoke at one which was the children are precious something, I forgot it. But where I told my story, and from telling my story, they could go, oh my God, like this needs to be changed. This is what's working for us. This is what we need to keep pushing and stuff, kind of thing. Okay. And do you have anything?
No, I think you've covered a lot of it there. Basically, the only thing I've got to add onto that topic is that when we get all the information from the young people, as Tash said, we bring it all together. In Tassie, the way we gather information is when we do hold our connection events that all the young people come to, is we have a topic that has come up in the past, such as sibling placement or placement stability or something like that, and we ask the young people, what they think about that, and we give them a little piece of paper being designed of a leaf or a star or something of the sort like that. and we'd give it to them, and they'd write down exactly what they're feeling. And how what's going on inside their head, and then we take all those and we break it down into what's the most common thing, and then a lot of that goes to our research team, and then the research team takes us from there.
Okay. So just explain to us the connection events. Are they events that are put together by Create, or do you mean connection with a small c, that it's just about connecting with young people where they are?
It's through Create. So Create run it's like a kind of activity. So in WA we're having a winter wonderland thing come up where children of all ages can attend, and they have a fun time partying kind of thing, they get to meet other people, and through that we get to also talk to them. With our YAGs, we have what is the biggest issue, because as you grow, or as new people come along, there's always new issues and stuff. So we take the biggest issue that's been talked about, and we ask other young people at the events what they think and stuff.
And what you're extracting from that is what John was explaining is getting put into papers and research papers, and then that's what's getting passed on to the department and the carers organisations.
Yeah, and
we understood that correctly.
We work with a variety of ages from 0 to 25.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
So we can talk to people that are still in care, people that are going through the leaving care process, and then people that have left care. We talk to all different, so they're all in different parts of their life.
Okay. And India and Kate, are you able to talk to us about the way in which you're meeting children and young people, what sort of structures and forums you have?
Well, we've been running peer support kind of programs. We've struggled to get off the individual peer support off the ground. But at the moment, we've been running some group activities where we take young people from the age of around 15 to 17 to wherever they want to go, something that they're interested in, that they haven't experienced. Like last year, we took them to the snow. We just like to, help them with their day-to-day stuff. I think we do try to do a lot of long-term work with young people, but also I think it's really beneficial when we get in there and just help them with whatever they're going through at any given time. Okay.
We do much the same thing as Create does, but instead of being through an organisation, we're advocates ourselves. So we're young people with a care experience advocating on behalf of young people as young people ourselves. So that's what our organisation is. And we've written reports on, wrote a report last year entitled Spaghetti Bolognese, which was about best interest case planning with the Department of Health and Human Services in Victoria, which was about issues that we're having, the understanding what that paperwork was, because it's legalistic and it's full of jargon and it doesn't actually make you a person, it's just ticking off another box. It's not well done and you don't understand. We've just had a proposal. Our peer support proposal has just been approved by the Anglicare CEO, so we're working on that at the moment. We've also written articles for Anglicare Australia about leaving care and issues that young people have had.
And what's India mentioned that you had a bit of a struggle getting the peer support program up and running. So 2 questions about that. What the struggle has been and what you hope to achieve with the program. So first, what the struggle has been.
The struggle has been actually getting in contact with young people, because especially those in resi and in kinship care, we've had a lot of, we've had a really hard time even being able to contact them, being able to meet them, discuss with them if it's something they're interested in. And
I think it's red tape really through DHS and the agencies. They don't want to let people in.
even though we've already been through it, we're already in.
We're offering them something that is really good, would be really good for these young people to come and attend. That is being able to actually go to these young people and say, look, this is who we are, this is what we do, it's been a bit of a challenge.
So you're struggling to make contact with them.
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're on the brink now of the program actually getting going. And what is it that you do hope to do?
We wish to set up an independent advocacy program. I think as the top tier, which is as Indy was saying earlier about having advocates who would go in and meet young people when they came into care and explain what they're going to go through and be able to go either with them or on their behalf to case planning meetings and so forth, so they can go to school and not be pulled out and to have their voices heard.
So that was that point you were raising earlier this morning, India, about the importance of knowing what your rights are. So that's part of the focus of what you hope your program will achieve?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just go back to Tash and Jono now? You've heard Kate and India say that they've been struggling to actually make contact with the children and young people, and it sounds like what you're doing is that you are getting over that hurdle and making contact with young people, or do you struggle with that too?
Can I take this
Yes.
one? Well, we create, as a new person enters out-of-home care, how do I put this? We've got a list of what's there, so we send out the information, if I'm correct, and I hope I am, of sending out that information to them in a little booklet, and they can join up if they like to, which I believe it's been very successful in that side of things. So.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
do
It's
you want to say
kind of
something?
like an entering care package, and the booklets that we send out have like your rights, and it's also based on your age as well. Like for the younger ones, it's very simple, and then it gets a bit more like in it. But can I just add as well? Create also does because we're set up in all the states and territories. So Create has in 2013 we had a national conference that brought in all the states and territories. So Create has in 2013 we had a national conference that brought all young people together, and it was the Strength to Strength conference. They're having one again this year. But we also get to find out what's happening in different states that we're missing out on, or that they're missing out on, and bringing it all together so that they can take it back to their state and go, we need to get this in as well. But yeah, when children come into care, we send out entering care packages, and we give DCP workers a chance to be what do they call it? A Create mate. So that they can, it's they send out to their workers and then their carers and stuff
Information about
it, so that we can get more people involved and stuff like that. So
I personally think, on top of it, I think Create's a fantastic organisation, but I believe, and I've heard this a few times, it's really metro-based. I mean, we're based in Bendigo and we're 2 hours away. So if convention events are run in Melbourne, we can't go due to travel. It's really hard for us to get to those events, especially if they're on the other side of the city. It's really hard to get to them. And it's really hard for us, even when you come to care. I remember I distinctly saw something from the Create Foundation when I came to care in a beginning care package, that I know I tossed the information in the bin because there was so much paper in that bag, and it wasn't really, it didn't look necessary for me. And I think that's another thing, is where our peer support program is going to these young people themselves when they come into care and explaining this to them.
face to face,
and giving them that information rather than just sending it to them and hoping that they look at it.
can I just add to that? In WA, we actually fly to, so I went to Geraldton and we spoke at them and stuff, and we fly to places and do connection events. So in Geraldton we did a connection event, and that was a 2-hour plane ride or something like that. We fly to places or travel the distance to Bunbury and stuff. But that's what we do in WA to expand, is we go to these places too.
I think
get other
we've
people
had.
involved.
I
as
think
well.
we've had one connection event in Bendigo.
Yeah.
We've got quite a big area. If we covered
Yeah.
a big area,
Mm-hmm.
there's really it's travel arrangements. I think in states, it's really hard to go to these things. So that's the point of I think our peer support program is to run it in Bendigo
For the region.
for our people, and then to get another YMI in another regional area such as Ballarat running, so they can do it for their region to try and condense it down a little bit.
So Tash and Jono, having heard that from Kate about that struggle to make the connection with Create, I had wanted to ask both of you about whether or not you had any concerns about the harder to reach groups. So that's just prompted me about whether or not you are concerned, in other words, that there are children and young people that aren't making contact with you, but you would like them to.
Of course, there is the young people out there that aren't making contact with us, and in the case of Bendigo, where it might be a fair list away, I think again it comes down to your caseworker as well, and being able to know your rights and get access to the information that we have, or get access to get travel allowance to go to different things as well in that circumstance.
It's a 6-hour round trip for us to get to Melbourne for a 2-hour event. It takes a long time, and if you're coming from somewhere else, that's things that's we're thinking regionally rather than a statewide.
So you're making it clear that the regional-based organisation needs to be thought about
It definitely needs to
in
be
each
thought
of the
about.
states and territories in terms of what immediate face-to-face support can be given to children and young people.
Create's fantastic, but it's just metro-based, and they've got the same thing with their workers as well. It's just really hard.
Having that capacity to reach everyone.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I just add something. I think
please.
again, like in Tasmania, we did have 2 officers, but I think a lot of it comes down to availability of obviously the budget of what Create can do with what they've got, and I think it's a very well run. What's the right word for that? It's the way Create run the programs, and in Tasmania we try to get to both ends of the state very regularly. So that might not be the case in other states and territories, and I think a lot of that comes down to availability of what we've got.
And also with Create, like we have
Money.
to. So in WA, we get our funding from various places. So we then need to report to them what we've come up with and stuff. And it's kind of like, so when we fly to, like, if we fly to Geraldton, if we don't have many people joining our connection events, coming to along to our connection events, we're not going to get the funding to go back there.
Yes.
So we have to show them that they're actually doing something, and everything through Create to continue to get funding for it is that we need to be we need to be showing on a piece of paper what we're doing and stuff.
Understand. Can I change topics now and take you, Tash, you and Jono back to something that both of you said again earlier today about if you were being harmed or hurt in your placement, what would be the things that would hold you back from speaking out, and what would be the things that would help you? And both of you talked about fear, about being afraid, and I just really wanted to ask both of you if you were able to expand a little bit for us on that fear, to describe it a little bit.
Well, in my case on that one, it's when I have had issues with carers or workers, and I've spoken to somebody about it, it's ended up before it's had any sort of, I'll say investigation for lack of other word, it's gone back to the person that I'm having that incident with. So there's been no communication with what I'm feeling or what's happening with me before it's been put back to that person. And then if you're in a placement with somebody, that can either break down or can, in my case, it can make it very dangerous to be there.
Yeah, a bit the same. But for me, it was also that I was afraid that nobody was going to believe me, that I was just going to be seen as a foster kid trying to cause trouble, that I wasn't going to get to stay where I was living because it was going to get back to the person that I was making allegations against, and that it was going to become very dangerous for me to stay living there, and I loved where I was living. So I was afraid that I was going to end up being homeless and not having anybody actually care about me. And yeah, like I think a lot of children in care are afraid that the placement's going to break down if they say anything, or they're not going to be believed. And there's a lot of other things that come into it as well. Like there's heaps of other stuff. And I think it's also that
Things that hold you back from speaking about
yeah.
How you're being harmed and what the dangers are.
Yeah, and I think for me, I felt like everything that I went through, I deserved.
Okay. And you spoke to us about the positives, what was helpful, and that was the youth worker. And that was because you felt that the youth worker was somebody that you could trust, that responded by first saying to you that they believed you.
And I also, with my youth worker, I knew that she wasn't going to tell anybody unless I said it was okay for her to say. She was very confidential with everything I said to her.
Yeah.
She kept it to her, and she didn't go back to somebody else and like tell them what I'd said and stuff. She'd ask me first if she could discuss it with somebody else.
So that was helpful. Jono, do you want to add anything to that about the sorts of things, whether or not it actually happened, or what other young people are telling you about the sorts of things that make it easier to speak about what might be hurting or harming you when you're in care?
Well, what made it easier for me was my last foster father. He didn't judge. He didn't, look at me like I was anything different. I was another human being with the same rights as everybody else. And that to me meant more than anything else. So when I first contacted him, I was just there for respite, just there for the weekend, and he gave me his phone number and he said, look, if you ever need anything, you can call upon me. And I did need something and I called upon him and he was there. And I think that's the main thing is, if you say you're going to be there as a caseworker or, a family person or anything like that, it's a big thing to say it. It's an even bigger thing to actually mean it. Mm-hmm. And that goes without saying with kids in care, they live on trying to find somebody they can trust.
Okay. And the sorts of things that children and young people are telling you, are you having discussions with them at that level about what they need to feel safe to talk about bad things that might be happening to them in care? If you haven't had those conversations, that's okay, but if you have, would be interested to hear.
We've had a few of those conversations with various people who've come along to our meetings, and I think the thing that Tash and John is hitting on is something that we've noticed a lot: stigma. Stigma of you get stigmatised as a care child, and it's the 99% to the 1% problem. It's the 1% who are always in crisis and are always running away and causing problems, and then you've got the 99% who are having other problems, such as not being able to have workers believe them and everything else, because you've always got troublemakers And I think that's the only way I can probably put it. It's
So I think are you talking about stereotyping?
yes, you get stereotyped, and I think that's a past issue because I know you guys have spoken to people who were in care, in institutional care, in the 50s, and they were all stereotyped as a certain type of child will go into care, a certain type of young person will go into care. It's all back on them, and that's still there in the community, and it's still there even in our carers and in our caseworkers, like caseworkers' opinions as well. That's always there in the back of the head in the community, and it makes life really hard for us, and it makes it really hard for us to be able to speak out if something's happening.
Did you want to add anything, India, to that?
No, thank you. I think Kate's covered it really well.
Okay. I'm going to change topics again. You all spoke to us about training and support for carers and talked about the importance of that. Can I ask whether or not any of you have been involved in the delivery of that training for carers? So, India, you look keen to say something?
I was invited several times over the last 2 years to attend foster care training and information sessions for prospective carers. And basically what I did was I just explained my story, my experience with carers, what I thought made a good carer, answered a lot of questions and did activities with the carers. And everybody who left that room told me how beneficial it was, and how, like, even seasoned carers who've been doing it for 10, 20 years told me that they were going to change their practices because of the things that I'd said.
Can I just add on to that? So my carer, she's been around a while, and she goes to the trainings, and she said that that from talking to me, she's able to go to the trainings and they're like when she's getting trained a certain thing, she's like, no, that doesn't happen, not in all cases and stuff. And she can take from my experiences and what I've said to her and stuff that and know a different way to deal with things and stuff. And she's been able to discuss with other carers that go to the trainings as well and go, well, like, this could happen as well and stuff. And I think that with the trainings and stuff, they do need to have insight from children, young people that were in care, so that they can make the trainings based around the children that are in care.
The real experience.
Yeah.
Can I also add on to
Yes,
that, please?
John.
In Tassie, I don't know how it goes much more around the nation. We actually, a couple of the young people do go to the foster care training, and we go to actually express obviously our story, the same thing, as well as what the young people are talking about and how they think, what can impact the foster carers to either, help their experience a lot better, or things like that as well.
Yeah, like I go to the caseworker trainings, and I think that them hearing from a young person who has dealt with caseworkers in the past and the huge amount of changes and stuff, that they are able to benefit better and become a better caseworker. That I think that children need to go to the foster care trainings as well.
Thank you. Now, I'm just going to check with Commissioner Fitzgerald now and see whether or not there's any
Just a couple of
questions he's got.
Just a couple of areas, if I can. As was indicated right at the beginning of the session, the Commissioner's heard lots of stories from people that were in care, many a long time ago and some more recently. I just want to get your views about some of the changes that have been introduced into the system, to see whether or not you think that they've made a difference, if I can. Just a couple of areas. And Justice Coates raised a number. One is about exiting and leaving care. So most of the people we spoke to who left care received no support at all many years ago. In more recent times, all governments and agencies have spoken to us about their leaving care arrangements. Just wondering if you can give me your impression of the leaving care arrangements as they've existed either for you or they exist today.
I think we sit with the leaving care support service within St. Luke's. we've always had really good relationships, and we did hear a former manager say that he really struggles because it's not funded as it should be. They can't offer it to everyone, especially in our region. There's a lot of young people who are leaving care who can't have a caseworker because we've only got part-time workers. It works really well when you have enough staff to run it well. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
And also within Tasmania, now with Create's help, they've also put down that the case plan for leaving care starts at 15 now. So that means if you know about it, you can start to work out what's going to happen when you turn 18, and like that as well. I myself didn't know nothing. I was just plopped out and said well done. So yeah.
That's what I was saying. They can't offer it to everyone. So then people leaving care, unless they're hooked in or they find out like Tash did and hook themselves in, it's not there because they can't give it to everyone, so they don't tell everyone. And then things like having case planning, leaving care starting at 15 instead of 17 and a half, which tends to be where it normally happens, doesn't happen.
I think it's also based on if the workers actually follow through with it, because in WA, when you turn 15, a part of your leaving care plan, you need to be linked in with the leaving care service. I've got a 17-year-old living with me, and she linked herself in. So I linked myself in, but it then came into effect that they had to do it from 15. So somebody else should have linked her in already. She linked herself in. And then there's also a big thing with we are ward of the state until we're 18, but this young girl that's living with me is getting no funding because she's classed as semi-independent. So she's getting no funding at all. And I think that it really depends on if the workers actually go through with it, like if they are linking them in, if they are starting their leaving care service, everything like that from 15 when they're supposed to be. But a lot of them are just getting forgotten and just, oh yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, that's not a high priority, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I think that's about case planning as well. They run on crisis. What I've noticed is, especially talking to workers as well, they're saying, we really want to link people into other services and things, but we've got so many young people we're taking care of ourselves. We've got 40, I'm dealing with 40 young people, and if half of them are having a crisis at any one stage, I've got to deal with all these crises, and I can't deal with trying to get them hooked into other programs, and that comes back to adequately funding the service in its entirety and having the workers there so people aren't overwhelmed and they're able to deal with the day-to-day things like linking them into services.
But it worries me that that they are, I get it, it's crisis and stuff, but with this young person, if it wasn't for me, when she turns 18, she would be homeless because it's not classed as priority and stuff. And it's me sitting there going, no, this is what's going to happen, this is what we're going to do, so that she doesn't end up homeless. And a lot of people are ending up homeless because once they turn 18, they're on their own. Nobody's helping them.
Can I ask this question? Is the time of exiting, if you were able to access a leaving care program or arrangement, is that a point in time where a person who had been had difficulties, been harmed or hurt whilst they were in care, are they likely to reveal what had happened to them at that stage, or does anybody even ask you to comment on any experiences that have happened to you whilst you were in care?
What do you think?
No.
For me, I kind of just came forward about it myself, but I don't think that a lot of young people will come forward.
Why is that? Is that a time that they just won't come forward, or is it that the environment in which that takes place, isn't one that you think would welcome somebody coming forward with complaints about what had happened?
I personally think they're just not comfortable because, you're still just coming out of that system where nobody's listened to you, it might not be for other people, but, for me it was nobody listened, nobody cared.
Yeah.
So we're still not going to be comfortable with sharing who we are. And, you know, I wasn't comfortable with sharing who I was until I joined up with the Great Foundation. And that's when they've given me that courage to actually speak up my story. You know, so I don't believe it's anything that can be done to encourage them to speak.
I think they need to work on the courage themselves to come forward, but I also think that there's a huge fear of what's going to happen when I'm 18, when I am leaving care. Suddenly, like a lot of children who live with their parents, they pretty much live with their parents until they're 25 or older. But when you're in care, you stop being a ward of the state when you're 18. You stop getting help. You stop getting anything. So suddenly you're on your own, and there's a fear behind that. Like, you're in the big bad world by yourself. So I really don't think that a lot of people will then come forward about what happened to them in care unless they have support from somebody else.
Yep.
You need to be safe and secure to reveal, I think, abuse and feel like so you're going to be believed. And if you're, like you said, leaving care, and even with a support service in place, you're 18 years old and you don't know what's going on. And I think that's a failure of the leaving care system, that it's not until you're 25. It's not concurrent with where the rest of the world is, where everyone else's parents are, where you can come and go if you need to. You can always go back home. You don't have that kind of support base.
I also think that it comes down to, for me, when I left care and I came out about some of the abuse, my sister had already told me that when she left care and she told them what she went through, they turned around and said that she was just angry and trying to get back at her foster carer. And I was afraid that that's what was going to happen to me. And then when I left care and I came out about it, they did say to me, are you just saying it to get back at your carer? And I think that's another thing, is like, it's more along with the belief that they're just going to try and cover it up with saying that you're just trying to get back at somebody and stuff.
It needs to be taken serious.
Yeah.
India, do you have any comments on that?
No.
Can I just follow on from that? Every year there are large numbers of complaints put in against foster carers across Australia. And every year young people that are in care make some sort of complaints in some way, shape or form. One of the things people will tell us, agencies and governments, is that they've improved those complaint handling processes. I was just wondering what your experience of that, because the complaints are very common in care. Abuse is less common in terms of the disclosure. But what has changed, for good or bad, in your experience in relation to the coming forward of a complaint and the way in which that would be dealt with today? Because previously we know how badly they were handled, but in more recent times people have told us that this is an area where there has been considerable improvement.
That's the I think that's the why my pet peeve is the complaints process, is that you're always kind of told, it's always on a piece of paper somewhere, that there is a complaints process, or someone will say, oh, you can make a complaint, but it's never explained. There's no way of actually knowing who that goes to and how that process works, and who's being told and what's not being told. And it comes back to what Tash and John were saying earlier about being believed as well. Especially if you tell somebody that somebody's done something, you're not happy with something, and then it goes back to that person. The confidentiality gets lost in the system. There's all sorts of, and that would be preventing people from making allegations and even feeling like they can make an allegation.
Has there been any improvement at all from your point of view, or from the networks of young people you speak to in recent times?
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
I suppose, John, I was saying, have you heard of any improvements in the complaint handling processes in any of the agencies or states in the networks that you mix in?
Not since I've left care, no. I've not really experienced anything that I've needed to complain about, but I've not really sat down and discussed with other young people their complaints and stuff, because at the end of the day, I'm not trained for that.
I guess for me, a lot of the young people, they know that they can make a complaint, but they don't really know how to go about making the complaint.
Yeah.
I do too.
Indeed. You agree? Okay, it's just I think going back to that point of where we don't know, therefore we don't. And I like John, I said there's always room for improvement, but I know we've spoken to some young people and they've said the same thing. They don't know the complaints process. And how can you complain if you don't know how to?
So you've made that comment a number of times, a number of you, Kate and others, about lack of knowledge. Who is the responsible person in the system to provide that knowledge to you? If I can just raise a couple of things. In a number of the answers to questions, both by Ms Furness and Justice Coate, only one of you have really talked about caseworkers favourably and a favourable experience. I think that was Tash. In most of the questions, you've looked for other people outside of the caseworker, teachers, friends, mentors, and what have you. And you've talked about the information that Create provides and other organisations provides. What is the role of the youth worker, the caseworker, in providing to you information, knowledge about your rights, to use your language, and ensuring that that actually happens?
Ideally, the caseworker should be giving you all the information you need, as they are the ones that are basically helping you through your life. They should be telling you who you can complain to, what your rights are, everything like that. You should have all the information from them. But there's so many times where you get a new caseworker. Like, I went through a time where I had 3 new caseworkers within a month. I hadn't even met them. Like, there's so many handovers and stuff. But ideally, it should be the caseworker that gives you the information.
What do you think?
India?
I was lucky. I had relatively good experiences with caseworkers. I did have a few turnovers, but they were, far enough apart for me to manage to build up trust and rapport with them. I was really lucky that I actually got the support and the funding to go overseas in my last year of high school. And since then, I've received heaps of funding and support with medical treatments and moving expenses, stuff like that.
I've had a few really good workers, but I've also had the case changeover and not knowing who my worker is. And I had a worker at one stage who was a respite carer, and she was coming in, and she ended up being not only my respite carer but my worker as well. So I had a really good rapport with her, and she was great because she was able to explain to me how to work things, what my rights were and how to make things work. But that's because we had a relationship, and I know she's still with the agency, but I catch up with her on occasion.
So if we just take the casework area, which is an area of particular interest to us, what is the single, if there is a single thing that you think needs to happen in relation to improving caseworker or caseworker connection with kids? Where, and as you've indicated, there's been some good experiences. Is there a single thing missing? Is it the turnover that's the major problem?
I think there needs to be more of an ownership placed on workers about their responsibilities. We've noticed that a lot of workers kind of push some tasks off onto carers or teachers, sexual education and health information, things like that. So we think that if the workers take ownership of what it is their responsibility to do, there will be better results.
I've noticed, sorry, John.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
I think that's the thing. There's workers, like I said earlier, it's a crisis, especially at Bendigo, because there's so many young people in care, and so few workers to go with them. Their caseloads are enormous. So then they're dealing with they're passing the buck on certain things that should be in their relationship, like giving information, health information, being able to provide those supports. But that's because they're dealing with people who are homeless or running away or everything else. There's not a lot of room to move there for them.
And that's when a lot of children are forgotten.
Yeah.
Because you get the bad case and then you get the good case, and the good case is always left behind and forgotten.
Yeah. And that brings me back to me on that one. I believe they should forget the files. Like as a worker, and if they're changing workers all the time, I believe the files should be forgotten. Because of the fact, as a new worker coming in, you don't know me.
Yeah.
You only know what you've read off a file that, it could be 5 to, 18 years of age. you know, I think instead of reading that file first, that you should meet the child, because that is, you know, that's who they are. They're not, you know, a barcode, a case file or anything like that. They are another human being. They're not a book to put back on the shelf. And yeah, that's my opinion on that one.
Yeah.
We've done that with worker training at St Luke's, where we've gone in and say, look, first thing you do when you become a worker for a new person is to take them out, forget the books, forget everything else, take them out and have a coffee with them, go meet them on their own turf, meet them on their own behalf, and form a relationship first and foremost, and then try and work in the other things. But the same thing we get, the feedback I'm hearing from workers is that they don't have time to do that in every case.
I think that's the important thing though, is when I would meet new caseworkers, that I'd tell them something, they're like, yeah, I read your file. And they would judge me based on my file. But that doesn't, I could have had a bad caseworker who didn't like me, could have had a bad placement, anything like that. Like that, my file doesn't say who I am. And a lot of children that I talk to have the same thing. The caseworker assumes that they know them because they've read their file. They don't actually take the time to know them, and they've already judged them. They've already judged them before even meeting them.
And at the end of the day, we're the experts on ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. The very last area, and it's probably one of the hardest. Over recent years, there's been a huge investment in improving the selection, training, screening of carers, foster carers and kinship carers. Notwithstanding the fact that there's a huge shortage of getting carers into the system, as you're aware of. Can I just ask this question? It may be an impossible question to answer. If it is, don't. Have we seen, from your perspective, both in terms of your own experiences and that of the young people you mix with, any significant change in the nature of carers? Any significant, or another way can I put it, do you believe that you would be more confident about the selection of carers today than people of a few years ago may have been?
I think the screenings have got a lot tighter, which is obviously a very good thing. But at the end of the day, as I said before, it does, you know, there's always room for that little bit of improvement. And what I've seen with through the Create Foundation in Tasmania, that carers are starting to have more say of what's happening. Like as me and Tash were talking about before in the break room, about holidays and sort of things like that. You know, it can't just come back to your worker on that circumstance. You know, if you've got a carer who's now your legal guardian, they've got to be able to have more rights. So if they want to go on holiday out of the state, that they can actually take you. You know, and have that freedom there, that they don't have to go through a list of paperwork to do that, but to actually have that little bit more freedom in that sense.
I agree with Jono in that sense, but that would be meaning less foster carers and more foster parents. I think that's a linguistic change that probably needs to happen within the system. But in saying that, I'm seeing more and hearing of more carers leaving than are coming in. Seems that the reverse is happening. The screening's improved, but at the same time, you're losing so many, especially the older generation, who are leaving, who are stopping being carers, and then, you know, that doesn't really work out when you've got more kids coming in than logistics.
And I believe it's not just the entry of foster carers that need to be, you know, looked at. I think it needs to be a continuous process that the carers that are already there, they still need to be screened, because what I've seen with the foster care training, they're there for a couple of days. You know, everybody can put on a fantastic face for a couple of days. You know, that needs to be constantly screened, that everything is fantastic in that house, that it isn't just a show every time a caseworker walks into the house. To me, it just needs to be a little bit more screened, as well as with the constant carers.
Like a continuous evaluation or accreditation process, is that what you're saying?
I think because things change over time. Things are always changing. You need to be continuing to reevaluate and stuff and keep screen
So
things
it's
do
ongoing
change.
monitoring, as you say,
Yeah.
that's important.
But I also kind of think that I'm not sure how it works, but I think that like you also need to look into the family members a lot more as well,
Yes, definitely.
because even like I think it's like you have to look into like the family that they're going to have continuous like contact with, but it's also the others that could eventually come and then have contact.
Yep.
That they're not getting looked into. They need to be looked into as well.
Talking about aunts and uncles and grandparents.
Cousins,
Yeah.
Yeah.
older relatives, anybody that they could potentially come into contact with at any family event or anything.
Because at the end of the day, they could be the ones that can do something.
Yeah.
You know, you might have the fantastic carer, but and again, it comes back down to this. You know, what happens if something happens? You know, are you really going to complain about your carer's aunt or uncle or cousin if you like that carer? You know, because of the fact is, if you like that carer, you're going to have in the back of your head, I'm going to have to move.
Yeah, and like I know somebody who they didn't have any contact with them for the first 4 years of living with their carer, and then because they were living in a different state, and then suddenly they moved back into the state and suddenly had contact with them, but they weren't looked into.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to, anybody that could potentially have any contact with a child
Yeah.
needs to be looked into.
What do you think?
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just one more matter, Ms Furness, and it just follows on from that. You heard Ms Furness when she did her opening address this morning talk about the breakdown in numbers of children and young people in kinship care and foster care and in residential care. So I just wanted to ask you about that in terms of the children and young people making contact in particular with your hands-on endeavours to connect with children and young people. Are you noticing that you're getting more contact from children in one form of placement rather than another?
We definitely are. We're getting more contact with out-of-home care and kinship care kids, whereas we can't even talk to the rest of the kids in our region. We can't speak to the residential children. And
Why is that, Kate?
this is like a closed system. There's always something going on. So we'll make an appointment to, and I think Frank, who's over in the audience, would be able to explain this better to me. We'd make an appointment to go and speak to maybe the head of a residential unit or something, and then something will happen within the unit, and they'll say, "No, you can't come in," or "No, we don't have anyone who could come and speak to you because this has happened or that's happened." It's a very closed system, and we just can't speak to them at all. And we've got so many other services, even within Bendigo, that we could offer these young people, but we can't speak to them. We can't offer them these services to them.
So the residential cares are definitely the hardest to reach.
Yes.
I think for Create in WA, ours is more children that live in relative care, so
kinship care.
Yeah, because I think that they don't want to feel like they are foster kids because they are living with relatives. So we have a hard time reaching out to kinship care.
I can't comment on that one because I'm not 100% sure because I don't have input on if they're kinship, residential or anything like that. So I've got no comment on that one.
Thank you. India, nothing to add to that. Ms Furness?
Thank you, Your Honour. I have no more questions, but thank you very much for being so open and frank with us about your views.
Yes. You've done a terrific job in here today, and we're very grateful for you coming in and travelling, and as Ms Furness said, being so helpful and cooperative and patient with us. We benefit greatly, obviously, from having the opportunity to hear from you. So thank you and keep up the good work.
Thanks for having us.
Perhaps adjourn for lunch.
Till 2. Thank you.